I welcome you here today on behalf of our college president, Dr. Gailey Gibson, our area-wide dean, Elvira Vieira, Dean Kirkland, and our director, Susan McDonald at Wise Women's Center. We at Wise Women's Center devote a lot of what we do with women and men as well to issues of violence and abuse. It is so important because it really takes up a lot of our time, and it's in each of our lives. It might not be inside your home, but it's sure enough in the home of one of your family members, your friends, your neighbor. It's all around, and with the things that we look at in the media, we really need to be knowledgeable and be able to take care of situations as they occur and when they occur. And you do that the right way by being taught the right things to do. We also want to just thank Dean Pat Slade from Student Life, because they have also been bringing programming that will bring information to us on relationship violence. It really is our honor today to have with us a very dynamic woman, a woman that took a very interesting path to get to where she is today. Her name is Donna Roman Hernandez. In your programs, you have a bio. I'm not going to read her whole bio. She is retired right now, and she's literally starting some new projects, just like young people have ideas and dreams. She's starting new projects, and she's a solo act and an expert trainer and teacher on domestic violence and sexual assault and other violence relationship crimes. She is a retired police officer, which when you look at her, you would never think she was a cop. She not only was such an excellent officer that she was chosen on the state level to train officers. So she became the teacher of officers. As a woman, you know that she has to be a very, very powerful and strong woman. So let's just give her a hand. Thank you. Just on that point, I'm going to let her tell you more about who she is, what she has done. But I want us to just all have an open mind about what the words you will hear today. Please silence your phones. Please put them away and treat this as a time when you were in class and you were not allowed to look at your texts, to look at your phone, and to do these other things that you do. This is officially class time. So please put them away and do turn down the ringers, not to disturb, because we are videotaping today. With no further ado, I would like to bring to the podium Ms. Donna Roman Hernandez.
I'm very pleased to be here today, very humbled also. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Thank you, Yelena, for the invitation to come back today. About 6 or 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to be a part of a domestic violence awareness presentation. While I was still a police officer, actually I was a captain at the time. And I also took classes at Essex County College, so kudos to all of you that are students here, that are continuing education students. Education is very important. Not only is it important for you as you move on in your career, but it's really important as you navigate life. I grew up in the wonderful city of Newark. I lived in Newark for almost 40 years. And I started my law enforcement career as an Essex County police officer, working in Newark. Although we had jurisdiction in 22 municipalities, I worked in Newark. And I loved serving the community where I was born. great job, my dream job. However, politics and money met, a lack of money I should say, and I was laid off and I transitioned to the western Essex part of the state, and I served almost 19 years in the borough of Caldwell and retired, as I said, at the rank of captain. Thank you. Thank you. When I came on the job, there were not many women. The Newark Police Department actually had more women than most, and I think they had 5. So I joined the Essex County Police. We were 4 women that came on close in time, same on the job. And I loved working with my brothers in law enforcement. As I said, it was my dream job. I was making a difference in the community that I served and lived. I went to Caldwell, and they were a little surprised to have me get hired because I was the first woman ever hired by the Caldwell Police Department, and I was the first Hispanic female ever hired by the Caldwell Police Department. So I also broke down those barriers, and I had to educate them about women and why women belonged on the force. I have to say it was a tumultuous relationship, being the first ever. However, I schooled them, and I persevered, and I retired, and I look at that as not only a learning experience for me, but I know it was a learning experience for them. I grew up in a very small home in the north end of Newark, and my mother was, and until the day she passed, was my angel on earth. My mother told me to not judge people by the color of their skin or by their culture, that we were all one. A very religious woman who mentored me and advised me my whole life about you can be anything you want to be because God bless America. That we had a constitution that protected us, and not only that, was that no one should discriminate against anyone because of the way they look. On the other end of that spectrum, my father was totally the opposite. My father was born in Pennsylvania and came up very hard in the coal miners' country. And he was a farmer of sorts, but as a young man, he and 4 of his brothers enlisted, joined to fight in World War II at the height of the war. He served his time in World War II. His ship was hit, and unfortunately, most of the men were killed, and he survived, floating on the bodies of his dead shipmates. After they were rescued, and he was just a handful of those who survived, he came to New Jersey, Asbury Park, where he met my mother, and they got married, and my mom had 3 children. I was the baby. She called me the baby till the day she passed. And I didn't think that there was anything different in our household. I thought we were just like everybody else. I thought that being strict, my father was strict, and discipline was just part of the learning experience and growing up and things of that nature. I didn't realize that his behavior was wrong until I was around 12 years old. Every summer, we would spend our weekends at the shore. My mother's side of the family lived in South Jersey. So we would do the things that kids do at the beach, go in the water, build sandcastles. But as I got older, I started to ask some questions of my cousins about right and wrong behavior in the house. So I'm going to stop with that right now, and I'm just going to show you a clip from a documentary that I produced that will give you a little inside view, because we have a limited amount of time here, and I think that what I've said in this documentary will just accelerate the story a bit, and I want to also leave time for questions and answers. So if you would, madam, just show, this is from The Ultimate Betrayal, A Survivor's Journey. These are just some excerpts, as I said, from the film. I have been a police officer
for more than 20 years, and I've been hiding a family secret for more than 4 decades. I'm ready to expose my secret to you on my own personal journey as I transition from the victim to a survivor. My father died in 1997, around the end, actually the beginning of 1998, because my mother died in 97, and he died a real horrible death. He had a lot of illnesses, and I remember going to his to the hospital where he was, and forgiving him. I don't even know if he was aware that I was even there, but I forgave him for all the things that he had done to me in this house. For like 32 years of my life, it was hell. But my mother had always wanted me to forgive him and move on because she knew that would be probably the best thing for me to do. But you know, he's dead. I forgave him. Doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it go away. But you know, I gotta move on. I mean, I have a husband now, and I'm in recovery with myself, with my own issues about violence. And you know, it doesn't make any sense to just keep beating the dead horse. It's done. You know, it doesn't take away the nightmares. It makes me a better person, that I know now that I can help people. And I can recognize it and identify it as abuse. And that makes me a better police officer because I know how to speak to victims. I understand victims. And it's a journey. And this is my private journey. And it began here, and it doesn't end here at this house, but it's the starting point of the journey, and I don't know if there'll ever be an ending point. I don't think it's anything you ever get over or get through. I think you just live with it.
So I wanted to give you a bird's eye view into what happened. For more than 30 years, I was my father's target. He was a police officer, and due to his World War II injuries, he was no longer able to stay on the job, so he had to retire from law enforcement. And that was devastating for him. So I thought, well, what better way than to have my father love me more, then why not I enter law enforcement? And I thought that would, in some way, show him my loyalty and my dedication to him, because that's what it was about, my father was all about. We all know domestic violence is about power and control. But a big part of that power and control is loyalty, is keeping the secret. It's very difficult to hold a secret, and it's even more difficult to keep it when you're being intimidated and violated routinely. My mother was Italian, and she came from the culture that you're married for life. And culturally, my grandmother was abused by my grandfather. My uncles had interceded many times, my mother told me, in the abuse against my grandmother. So my mother was used to seeing that type of abuse. Not that she wanted it, but she was used to seeing it. And what happens is, after this cycle of violence perpetrates itself, you almost feel as though this is your life. My mother told me later in her life that she felt stuck. Where could she go? a woman who had a sixth grade level education. She wasn't trained to do anything else but be a mom. She felt stuck. My brother, who was hospitalized several times due to the injuries incurred by my father, he went on to marry someone, and after marrying her, he perpetrated violence against her daughter. My sister always was in denial about everything, even though she was law enforcement as well. So my brother left, my sister left, and I stayed behind because I knew that I was the balance between life and death for my mother. He had firearms, I had firearms. Part of my salvation and sanity was college. I loved school because in school I could be me. My teachers patted me on the back, told me great things, and inspired me. So I was at Rutgers University until the library closed. I just stayed there as long as I could because I felt that that was, as I said, my salvation. That education would propel me into life circles where I wouldn't need my father. My mother and I wouldn't need him. But the irony of that is that I was going to work with bruises and scars, fresh bruises, underneath my uniform. And I was locking up the bad guys for the same acts that my father perpetrated against me. So not only was I holding the secret of domestic violence in my home setting, but I was holding the secret of domestic violence as a police officer. Most of the officers were amazed at my intuition and my abilities to recognize domestic violence in the home setting. And I would always say, well, you know, I'm a nerd. I'm in college. I'm always at the library. I read a lot. But that wasn't true. I was a liar. I knew it because I knew what it looked like. I knew what the eyes of a child who was abused looked like. I knew the silence of a victim was very telling to me. And I think they knew too that I knew, because I handled them very gently. I didn't ask questions in front of the other officers. I knew, and I proactively took care of matters and made sure that if the case went to prosecution, that my case was tight. I did all my investigation, I had all my evidence, and I was going to lock them up. And I did, with the law on my side. So all that my mother taught me about being good to people, about helping people, made me the police officer that I was. Unfortunately, leaving that family setting was not easy. I lived in that house of horrors for 33 years. An adult, not married, failed relationships, and a police officer. I learned some of that toxic behavior from my father that was responsible for me not having good social relationships or partners in my life. I look back on it at times and think, how did I get through all of that? Faith. Faith and just some people believing in my abilities more than I could even dream of my abilities. Teachers, mentors. My family, they all knew everything was going on because my father freely and violently abused all of the children, in front of his side of the family and my mother's side of the family. And I knew that they were all afraid of him because my mother told me they were. Fear doesn't go away because someone tells you that you're safe. Fear is forever. Even today, as I was driving here, I thought, maybe my father will be there. How bizarre is that? My father's deceased since 1998. But I was afraid that he might be here. As the child inside of me was afraid of that. It's not easy for me to tell my story, but I must. I must tell my story because I promised my mother prior to her death that I would. That finally, all that we went through would help someone. And that's why I tell it. So my mom had suffered some health-related injuries, but mentally she suffered more than I can even tell you. She would go to the doctors and he would prescribe some Xanax and other medication for her stress and anxiety. And she became an alcoholic and dependent on Xanax. She had agoraphobia and was afraid to leave the home. I know that sounds bizarre, but I think for her, she knew, at least knew, the dangers in the home, but her fear of leaving without any money, housing. My father controlled all the money. When I got paid, I gave my mom some money for her to get things for herself, but he held all the money. So her fear was she would be homeless. So I safety planned and got an apartment, furnished it, and brought her there one day after the doctor. And I said to her, we have some place to go. Consider leaving. Because I knew that the lethality factor, meaning his propensity to take our lives, was increasing. Because he had open heart surgery, he had some loss of oxygen during the surgery, and he was worse when he came out. He was still physically strong though. My father was a very strong, physically strong man. So I never let my guard down with him at all. I slept with a firearm under my pillow and Christmas bells on my door because I didn't want him to come in during the night. You know, even saying this, it feels shameful. It does. I feel weak at times when I go back and think about this. But unless you lived my life, unless you saw what he did to my mother, it's hard to understand why we stayed. And that is often the question that's asked of victims, why do you stay? And it's an unfair question. Because 9 times out of 10, it's based in fear. The fear of the unknown. The fear of lethality if they leave. So getting back to the safety planning, I safety planned and I told my mother, it's our secret, our secret. Unfortunately, my mother, who loved her children equally, even though they abandoned her in her time of need, she mentioned it to my sister. And she mentioned it to my father. And I'll tell you how I know. I'll tell you how I know. I was at Rutgers, and I had gotten my criminology book. Now, we're talking back in the day, so we had books. We didn't have Kindles, and technology isn't what it is today. And my law enforcement colleagues that are here, I know you understand about the books. They were huge, criminology, and it had a nice crisp binder. And when you open the page, it was just something about, and I was a nerd, I was a book person, I was always in the library, so it was just opening the book and feeling that crisp page. It was like that was my escape. When I opened that book, I escaped. I came home from Rutgers and it was a sunny, hot afternoon. And I walked in the door, I couldn't wait to show my mother that book. My whole weekend would have been reading that book. I came in the door and I heard an argument in the kitchen. And I said, I'll just sneak up the stairs until it's over. As I went up the stairs to my room, I heard something I never heard before. My mother said, I'm leaving you. I just felt that my heart dropped right now. Because that's what it did that day. I heard her say, I'm leaving you. I couldn't cycle that as much as I could get down those stairs. I got down the stairs and I walked towards the kitchen. And in the doorway of the kitchen, I saw my mother, all 4'11" of my mom, pass through the doorway with a cleaver in her hand. Whoa. I had that same reaction. Whoa. I still had the book in my arm. I think that was my backup. My book was my backup. I needed that book for my power. It was like a power source for me. I got into the kitchen, and my mother was going to stab my father. She had him up against the wall. It's a very small kitchen. And I dropped my book. And I remember grabbing her physically, and the cleaver fell right in between my father and me. And I remember pushing her with some force out of it. And as I turned, my father and I were almost nose to nose. And he stomped on my book, and I could hear that binding crack. And it was on. It was the binding, yeah. Yeah, it was that simple. That binding cracking was my release. That was everything to me, were those books. Books today are very important to me still to this day. I refuse the Kindle. I need books. There's some security factor with books. Thank you. So the book fell, he stomped on it, and like cat-like reflexes, my father picked me up by my jaw. By my jaw. And I was on the kitchen table in seconds. Wow. And when I fell onto that table, I thought I cracked my back. And he mounted me like a wrestler. And he told me, I'm going to kill you now. And he began to strangle me to the point where my larynx was trying to deflect all the pressure. And I felt myself floating above, watching him do this to me. But I was not unhappy. I was happy to be leaving. I just wanted to go. I've never thought of suicide or harming myself, but in that moment, I just wanted to go. And what they say on TV about leaving, I never had any of that. I just knew it was time to go. And what brought me back was my mother, one scream, you're going to kill her. And I knew that if he killed me, he would kill her. And she meant more to me than I meant to myself. We were one. And I don't know what I did, but I got away. I'm sure I struck him. I remember doing something to get him off of me, but that is not clear to me. The next thing I remember was loading my firearm, my .38 revolver, in my room. So there's a space, and I don't remember that. Blackout, yes, thank you. I heard him coming up the stairs, and we met at the top of the stairs. And I cocked my firearm and I put it at his forehead. And I remember very distinctly saying this: "You're never going to touch me or my mother ever again." Thank God I didn't pull that trigger, because that's what he wanted. That's what he has always wanted. He had always wanted with me a confrontation, a lethal confrontation, where he could get away with me defending myself. He knew as a cop. It was almost as if he had planned this and practiced it over the years. We left and we never went back. He stalked me. He stalked my mother. He did all the things that you hear that abusers, these master manipulators, do. He did it all. He went to my employer. He fabricated things. And we just stayed away. My mother passed away. She had five years away from him, but because of all the medical issues, her own issues, she died a horrific death. She had cancer. She was a chain smoker. 73 years old, her life was over. Ironically, 9 months later, he died. And my sister surfaces and said that I should make amends before he passed away. So I decided that I should have something to say to him before he passes away. Because what I learned is closure for victims is how you identify it and what you want it to be. And he never really heard from me. So I went to the hospital. He was unrecognizable, the way he was suffering. And I didn't have any happiness in his suffering. I wasn't like that. But I knew he was close to death because it was pretty evident. As cops, we've seen, death. You more or less can gauge it when, you see someone at that point. And I asked him, "Do you know who I am?" And I knew he knew. And I said, "I have just one thing to say to you. I forgive you, but I'll never forget." Because I wanted him to know that I'll never forget not only what he did to me, but how he destroyed a family. How I was dysfunctional for many years because of his behavior. And how my mother sacrificed and allowed herself to be degraded by him just because she was his wife. Just because she never fought back physically. No one, not even someone who is responsible for giving me part of life, has any right to take the years of innocence away from me, or destroy what relationship I did have with my mother. So I felt victorious. I felt for the first time in my life that I actually had courage. The courage to determine what happens to me, what happens to my life. So I have to admit, a weakness. It's never easy to admit a weakness, but my weakness was that I learned that behavior and I became a master manipulator verbally. in relationships with intimate partners. I was so unsuccessful with relationships until the age of 40. Because I always wanted to be in control. I wanted to be the one who determined what went on in the relationship. So I went to therapy. Best thing I ever did. I got help. I helped myself, and I had someone else help me. To understand that it wasn't my fault. I wasn't responsible for his behavior. And in part, and this is going to sound even difficult to say, even in part, he was not fully responsible. Because his mother and father were the bad examples, where she beat them with a hot buttered cord from the iron regularly. And she worked them like plows on the farm. He learned that behavior. All the brothers learned that behavior because all my uncles were like my father. So accepting where you are in life, knowing that you have to change at the age of 40 is not easy. But my mother told me before she died, not only to tell her story, but she told me, I don't want you to end up like your father. So for me, go to counseling and get better. And I did. So I come here today telling my story to all of you. If you see something, say something. If you know someone is in a toxic relationship, dating relationship, young women dating, young men dating, as a parent, say something. If you really love someone, love them unconditional, and say something. It's not snitching. It's not snitching. It's not. You're saving someone's life. When you read in the newspaper that a young woman or young man was killed, because it happens to men also, it happens in homosexual and lesbian relationships, it happens in homes. It's really a household thing that spills over into the world, because you have to be a household member. Unless it's a dating relationship, then the law applies differently. But if you live in a home with your grandmother, and your grandmother is a strict disciplinarian, and you're over the age of 18, and you're beaten or you're verbally abused, that's domestic violence. The age factor, somebody could be 100 and still capable of being a batterer. And in dating relationships, in dorm settings, that's domestic violence, because it's a household. You're in a living condition, a household condition of sorts. Don't end up like me. A woman in her early 50s who finally has some comfort and sanity and safety in her life. I'm one of the fortunate ones. I surpassed the odds. I have a loving husband who gets me and understands that there are days where I go back in time and he goes to the gym. He knows when I'm like that. But he always is there to comfort me when a memory attacks. He's there to advise me when I'm not right, when my temper is predisposed to be over the top. He gently says, you can't control all those memories, but you got to get a handle on what's healthy for you. And your mom wouldn't want to see you upset. So, finally, I'm in a very peaceful place and a very loving place. And I have friends, good friends, like my friend Zulma Cabrera with the Hispanic American Law Enforcement Society, Tom Masters, former head director of the U.S. Air Marshal Service, and is working tirelessly with all the diverse law enforcement agencies. We all collaborate. And Corrine Campbell, who had to step out a moment due to a parking situation, the president of the National Organization of Black Women in Law Enforcement. It's due to my brothers and sisters in law enforcement that understand me, that I am still a dysfunctional person, but now I'm functioning in a functional world. And they understand that about me. So I'm going to end with that and open it up to any questions with any time we might have remaining. And thank you for your patience in allowing me not only to tell my story, but to keep my promise to my mother and let you know what happened. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you for an informative, interesting talk, because it wasn't a lecture, it was really a talk.
Thank you.
Just talk to us. I got teary-eyed at certain points.
So did I.
I thought I was going to lose it.
Me too.
I thank you again. This is really so important. One question that I would like to ask is this. I would like to preface it, particularly in the Black community. With all of the police brutality, with all of the killing of young lives, undeserving, unprotected, and it's just something that's happening all over the country. It causes another level of distrust of law enforcement in respect to, well, if they're killing my cousin, you know, if this is happening, if this happened to Eric Garner, if this happened to Michael Brown, then why would I want to go to them, the enemy, to say, I'm tired of my boyfriend beating me up. I'm tired of going in my bedroom and hearing my mother cry herself to sleep because I know I can't say nothing because then my father is going to hit me. So we understand that nationally, this situation is going on where it becomes law enforcement against us. One thing that you said that was quite significant is that you realized at 40 that you had to be healed. Yes. And you took those measures. There are a lot of law enforcement officers that need to be healed. So a lot of, I believe, and this is my opinion, that a lot of this tragedy that happens and is brought forth by unhealed law officers. And in fact, and it doesn't matter if it's law enforcement or something else, there's a lot of us that need to be healed. So my question is, what would you recommend to young people in particular, but those of us that have a challenge with trusting law enforcement? Because that is a problem that keeps someone from stepping up. And you're already in fear of the perpetrator. So you don't need to be in fear of what might be your saving grace. So is there something that you could share with us about that? Thank you.
Throughout my career, I met more good law enforcement than I did bad. I think in every profession, you have people that need to be healed. I truly believe that. I saw some officers' behaviors throughout my career that I didn't approve of. But for the most part, law enforcement officers have power and control and authority. That's very dangerous for anybody to have that. Growing up in a diverse city of Newark, I came from a very spiritual mother. And so I didn't understand discrimination until I got older, when I went to high school. And during the time in high school, there was a movement of students from one part of the city of Newark to another part of the city of Newark, where there was the desire was to have a balance of diversity in the schools. And I appreciated that because I came from diverse cultures. The organizations that I have mentioned, and Karina, I had mentioned that, just wanted to acknowledge again your presidency of the National Organization of Black Women in Law Enforcement. We have summits, we have meetings where we come together. We had a blessing, we had the blessing of the badges. Halia is always seeking to have diverse conversations. And Tom, you're an innovator and a pioneer in diversity throughout your whole career. And I think if we were all up here together, we would all say that it's the few that taint the good. But you only need one bad apple to rot in that barrel. We do need policies revised. They're archaic. And these policies that police officers must adhere to must be clear. That you can, what you can and what you cannot do. And they should be held accountable through those rules and regulations initially. That if they did something wrong or outside the law or above the law, they will be held accountable. And it doesn't matter how the media or the pundits, what they say. This is something that has to be happening in police departments. And that rank is just not given. Rank is earned and deserved. And just because someone is the chief or the director may not always mean, and I'm keeping it real here, that that person is the best qualified. These are the demons that are still in law enforcement. When I went to Caldwell, oh, they didn't like me because I came from the city of Newark. And that was my cross to bear. But there were policies that I held them accountable to. And I took them to task in court federally twice. Because they did not want to promote me as a female. They did not want to promote me as a Hispanic. And they did not want to promote me because I came from the city of Newark. And I was not born and raised in Caldwell. So I took them federally. I had all my evidence collected. I knew what I needed to do, and I won. I didn't even set foot in front of a jury. They settled. Yeah. They settled with me. Because they thought that I was going to take the abuse I took in my home. Wow. They had the wrong woman on the wrong day with me. That's right. So yes, I don't have all the answers though. But what I do know is that accountability is everything. And diversity. The doors should not be closed to some and open to others. If you're going to take a test, all should be prepared. There shouldn't be secret meetings on how to take that test, as our diverse organizations all do. We now, in partnership, not me, we in partnership, and I would like my law enforcement partners to just stand up for a moment, because I'm here today with the support of them. With the support of my partners in law enforcement. I am here today. They have come to say to me today, we support you. We need to change the way people think. Yes. Are there problems in law enforcement? Absolutely. But putting that in the hands of the media is not where it belongs. Because the media is there to twist things. They do make it worse. They do make it worse. Calmer heads prevail. Look, I'm a big supporter of change. And just a few days ago, the president showed change when he walked across the bridge in Selma. That to me was a very significant walk. Because not only were the rights of African Americans ensured in part through the years of what Dr. King did, but the women also. Women also. So, as a reader and a lover of history, especially in Women's History Month, Sometimes it takes a very strong woman to stand up to an institution like I did in policing. But it takes a group of individuals to come together from diverse cultures to make that change right. So that's where the problems are. It gets caught in the bureaucracy of that police department or that agency because they don't want it to look like everybody's bad. Well, just get rid of the ones that are bad. And stop hiring people based on favoritism. You have to have a protocol. Corporate America has a protocol. The guy at the top, he got there because he's got the money for the most part. But in law enforcement, the chief is just equal to any other employee because he gets a check because he's not the ultimate boss of anybody. The ultimate bosses, that's taxpayers and that government. Okay? So we got a long road ahead, not only for diversity, but for women. Because every time I see us getting a couple of steps ahead, there's some law or program that helps women in need that's taken away. Young mothers, children with special needs in diverse communities in the city of Newark, where I'm born and raised. With your program, there's always cutbacks. You see, it's a big cycle, and it's all about who holds the money, who holds the power and control. That's what it's all about. So my advice to all of you who may be skeptical of the police, who may have been profiled by law enforcement, who are afraid to speak up, and you don't know what to tell your children or your grandchildren about the police because of all the media hype and all the bad things that you see on the news. Reflect on this day and the organizations here that are my brothers and sisters in law enforcement. And my honesty to all of you is that stay with your convictions, and if you have been wronged, there is a system. If we need to change it, you may have to change it. I've changed the one that I was with. But stay true to who you are, and don't let anyone treat you less than what you would want yourself treated anywhere else. So I have a passion for it because I've been there. And like I said, I don't have all the answers, but you know, collectively, law enforcement still, the heart of law enforcement is to protect and serve. And we do a good job every day, just by the virtue of that uniform on, by the virtue of that uniform. We now are the new enemy. And it's not always fair to judge us like that. Thank you.
I have a question.
Any other questions?
Up here.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you keep in contact after your parents passed away with your brothers and sisters?
No, I haven't kept in touch with them even when my mother was alive.
Do you have any kids of your own?
No, I don't have any children. None of us have children. And that's very significant because usually children that experience the decades of violence and everything, most times we are afraid to have children because of that cycle of violence and almost that genetic fear that we could do the same thing because of what we've seen. I have never had that feeling towards children. I'm very blessed, but they betrayed my mother. That's why the film is called The Ultimate Betrayal. They betrayed my mother. And for me, that's the ultimate betrayal. Advocacy is my life. Whether it's my own advocacy, whether it's my collaboration with my brothers and sister organizations, advocacy is so important because we have to be each other's keepers. We have to be each other's mentors. Last I heard, Mars, there's no space for us. Only planet Earth. We're all here. Nowhere else to leave, to a paradise or anywhere else. Well, what you're doing is you're establishing a history with the police department, and that's very significant for many reasons. Is that the police department is made aware that in this particular home setting, There's domestic violence, but the victim is in fear. Now, I've seen incidents of domestic violence similar to that, where neighbors have called, I've responded with my partner, and we are assaulted not only by the batterer, but by the victim. Because there's something that keeps her there that's so personal to her that she probably does not even want to share it because she's embarrassed to share it. But by the fact that you are establishing that history is important for many reasons. If one day she decides that she's not going to take it anymore and she fights back, the history legally is that she had never called the police, but that didn't mean she wasn't a victim. She fought back. Now, the law is the law. It speaks to, you know, defending yourself and whatnot, but at least there's some hope. You know, there's a record, right? And it's positive. It's a bad record, but it's a positive record in that moment. And it could be prosecuted at a different level. So, once again, thank you for being one of the silent heroes that looks out for someone that you love. I tried. I tried when my mother was very ill, and my brother said to me, and this is going to be very hard to say, but I will. He said if I signed over the part of the house to him that me and my mother scrapped together money for, that he would at least visit.
Wow.
So that he would visit.
He wanted half of the money.
Wanted the half of the home. My mother owned half and I owned half. He wanted her half.
Why?
Well, because once again, he's dysfunctional. I don't understand him anymore. Maybe I don't understand that. So I told him, well then, you know, don't. And my sister was always trying to stay in my father's favor because he had all the money, and when she died, she got a very lucrative amount of my mother's money. So I just don't play that. That's not me. You know, I could live in a box as long as I'm safe. And, you know, biologically, I wish, you know, they're my mother's children. I wish them well. But my wellness depends on my future depends on my wellness. And my wellness is I'm happy without them. And the dedication to my mother was more important to me, and the loyalty to her, than to have people whose loyalty is questionable. And my friends will tell you, loyalty means a lot to me. They know that about me more than anything else. And I'm proud to say that I'm a loyal friend and I'm a loyal spouse. There was no molestation. No, it was just,
Physical and mental.
it was physical and mental, but it was horrific physical. Horrific.
You would think that the children would side with mom, but
That's not what the manipulator does.
yeah, but
He exerts less force to receive loyalty. So I got it all at the end because they left and they didn't come back. Well, I left my business cards here. If you go online, you could actually see it for free.
Okay.
I believe it's still on, if you just Google it, The Ultimate Betrayal. But I have cards down here. You're free to take a card so that you don't have to pay for it.
Okay.
I have distributors, but those distributors, they're angry at me because I'm not a good businesswoman. But I have other movies that I've done, that's my business. But for this movie, because it's to help people, you know, they're angry at me because I tell everyone, go online and you probably can see it for free. If not, it's on Amazon. You can download it for a very nominal fee. I mean nominal fee.
Okay.
So the distributors don't let go of me because of that. But the cards, you know, you have my cards. And not only have I told my story, but I've told other survivor stories. In fact, I'll be showing Newark Street Preachers very soon. I'll be collaborating with my organizations. It's a film I did about 4 pastors in Newark and the work that they're doing to stop the killings. So I haven't really shown it yet in New Jersey. I don't know why. It's been received with great applause on the West Coast. But I'm going to be showing that in Newark as a fundraiser for one of our organizations with purpose. So there's a lot of great films that I've done because it's told the stories of other people like me that have gone through tragedies and have turned it around and have made the tragedy their triumph.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
What about your extended family? Like your mom's side and your dad's side of the family?
All my aunts and uncles are deceased. My mother was the baby in her family, so it was an older family. And my cousins, I do have a relationship with some of my cousins. Others have told me, how could I do that? Make a film, I should be ashamed of myself. And my response to them is, if you're looking for shame, you gotta look in your mirror. Because you should have stepped up, and I'm not gonna bear the burden of your guilt. It's as simple as that. Because when you are a survivor and you move on, you don't want anybody pulling you back. So if they had, displeasure with it, it's because they knew it was happening, but they didn't do anything about it. So, I always wish everyone well, but I have to think about me first, because I put me on the back burner for over 30 years. Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. Of course, for Yelena, thank you for always following up, Yelena, and thank you for all that you do and remembering me. Ms. Brooks, thank you for remembering me and asking me to come back after 4 or 5 years. And I did say this, we all still look pretty good. I mean, yes. we haven't seen each other in about 5 years, we have kept each other, we've kept each other really looking good. You have to tell women that all the time. Your girlfriends, it's very important for women to compliment women and to accept that compliment with a lot of grace, right? Because if we wait for others, sometimes it doesn't come and then you get upset. So thank you.
I would like to say thank you to Ms. Donna, and on behalf of Wise Women's Center of Essex County College, I would like to present her certificate of appreciation in recognition of your contribution to community education, awareness, and self-service.
Wow!
With Essex County College, Florida.
Thank you.
We're so very grateful, as Yelena said. I'm so happy because Yelena doesn't like to come to the mic. She does such a wonderful job. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank your instructors for bringing you. There are many times when we have the opportunity to go to different events and activities that may seem, why is that important, or that's boring, or I'd rather be doing something else. But in life, you will find that when you put yourself in an educational environment, that so much opportunity lies before you to learn things that you would have never thought of yourself or chosen to learn. But then later in life, 10 years, 5 years, 2 years from now, somebody sitting in this room will have their life saved by something that they heard today. Because you have to realize, particularly young people, and you're all younger than me pretty much, is that as life goes on in our ability to retain the things that we learn, is that we become prepared for what we do 5 years, 10 years, 15, 25 years from now. So what you learn today, you might not even see it valuable until 5, 10 years down the line. So therefore, and you mothers and fathers, teach your children. That was one strong message that we got from Ms. Hernandez today. Teach your children, protect your children, save your children by saving yourself. So we would like to give, and we thank you, friends, support team, for coming to support Ms. Hernandez. And will we all just give her a hearty round of applause? And I'm just very happy that the leadership of this college supports this type of programming and information sharing that goes on. Thank you for coming.